For those who don't know me, I'm Haven Pell, and I've been involved in this for now a third of a century. This is take two. It's probably one of the few do-overs in court building that has been recorded. I am not at home. I am in the offices of MTFA, the architects who are who are designing the court for us. To my left, smiling, soon to be waving, is Michael Foster, who, given that it's Michael T. Foster, I'm drawing some conclusion about MTFA and who's really in charge here. The one he pointed to is his daughter Alex Foster, also an architect with the firm. And then elsewhere in one of these little screens is Braden Field, who is the third. So he might wave or do something, and you may well hear from him. The process of building a court and the ancillary facilities is a very interesting one. There are many aspects of the court itself that are subject to design considerations. And the other day, Ivan Ronaldson, who's our professional, Chris Motes, John Motes, excuse me, and I spent 2.5 hours with Chris Ronaldson and with Colin Lumley. Chris Ronaldson, you all know, as a former world champion. Many of you wouldn't know that Colin Lumley was the original handicap zero, that was the benchmark for all handicaps. We came up with a spreadsheet, which would be very difficult to see here, and I could ask you a question. How many dimensions are there in a real tennis court? Since everybody is muted, I'll answer the question for you. It's 36. Every single one of them makes a difference. And so we spent 2.5 hours trying to think about all of those and to get all of those right. And those are simply the dimensions. That's before you think about how do you build a floor? How do you light the court? What are the colors? How do you develop the social spaces that are around the court that are so much of the fun that we have because we play this? And so it seemed like it would be a very interesting thing for those of you who haven't had this chance to see a little bit of how it's done. And so this evening we propose to spend maybe half an hour or so on discussing different aspects of what we're trying to design. We're going to show you some pictures, and we're going to take some questions and endeavor to be done maybe by 7:15, something like that. And so that's really the introduction. I'm happy to pass it over to you, and why don't you guide us the rest of the way?
Well, good. What I'd like to do now is go to the share screen, and while we're doing that, to say that how much we have really enjoyed researching the history of court tennis, or real tennis, and learning about the subtle implications of all 36 dimensions and why they're so important. But before I do, let's go to the first image that kind of gives you a context of where this is going to go. This, if you've ever been to Prince's Court, the existing court in McLean, and the last court tennis facility built in the DC area some 30 years ago, this is about 2.5 miles away, and it's part of the campus of Westwood Country Club. And if your cursor works, you'll see a tennis bubble to the left of the pool. We are going to replace that with a new tennis facility that will have the tennis court on the far right side. That really is central to a activity of a very nice country club good golf course, good facilities, and will be further distinguished with real tennis. Next image. The overall campus master plan we've been working on with the club for some time. We were delighted to have real tennis join the program. These are a few images of the new building. Next one. And this is going to be the backdrop of the court tennis that will have some natural daylight in it and have a high volume space to capture all the dimensions. What I'd like is Braden, who's really the one that's in charge. He's been driving this and has been all over it and has done a great job putting together the design and bid documents and drawings along with Alex. And I'd like for him just to kind of walk through some of the overview of the plans.
Sure, thanks, Michael. So, and it's great to start with a high level kind of overview because it's easy to get lost in the details of the exact grind specification of the floor down to the nuance of 2 inches versus 3 inches on the bando. But it's really important to start from a high level and work our way down to that level of detail. So just for some additional context, some of you should be able to make the jump between that aerial Google Earth image and this site plan. Alex, if you can hover over the gray area at the bottom, that's an existing clubhouse, pool house that helps support their pool. And in the upper left area of that is their tennis pro shop. So the existing facility has locker spaces and a pro shop that supports their tennis program at the country club that provides access directly into the indoor tennis bubble. So we're going to kind of piggyback onto that infrastructure and provide access with locker rooms and control for a pro shop that you get into the new tennis facility through this pool house. So we're connecting it with a small bridge and an extension of their porch that you can see there where Alex's cursor is. And as you come into the building, there will be a small entry landing that you then go down to the court surface level, or you go up half a flight to an upper mezzanine level. And if on the left side, you'll see there's 3 lawn tennis courts that will be replacing some of the existing indoor tennis courts there. And then on the right side, circled in the red dash, is the portion of the building that's going to house the court tennis court and support spaces. And if you can go to the next slide, this is still at a zoomed out level, but this is the upper level. And we'll zoom into both of these in just a second and go over it in a little more detail. But this is what you see as you come up to the upper level that will overlook the tennis courts on the left and court tennis on the right. And so if we can go to the next slide, we'll zoom in a little bit. And now this is that area enlarged that was previously highlighted in red. On the left is the lower level, which is at the playing surface court level. And then on the right is the upper level. So just by way of orientation, you can see at the bottom that entry landing is where you enter the building, and you can go down half a flight to get down to the lower level. And you come into a lower gallery space that serves as kind of a lobby and a informal gathering space where folks can hang out and watch the lawn tennis players on the left side, or enter into the kind of real social space for the court tennis side. There's an opportunity for a lot of wall space that we've been talking about, great opportunities to have display and a gallery that can really help show the history and the evolution of the game. And I think Westwood, as well as the court tennis group in DC, are both really interested in sharing the evolution of tennis as a game and trying to represent that as kind of a gallery space. So as you come in, this Royal Dead-On gallery is kind of an extension of the Dead-On space that can have a fireplace in it. It can have informal seating. It'll have additional viewing through the gallery to watch the game, but it can also serve as kind of an elevated club room of sorts where court tennis players viewers, visitors can all kind of gather and watch the game and congregate together. And then that also helps provide viewing and access into the court. So moving down the penthouse side, penthouse gallery, you have the pro shop access off of that, which has visibility through windows into the court and into the lobby space. And then some storage support spaces and space for lockers along the back there. And then on the upper level, moving to the plan on the right side of the screen, coming up the stairs, there's an upper landing that looks out over the lawn tennis side that's kind of open to that volume and gives a visual connection there. But you come through a pair of doors into an upper lounge that really just provides a really great gathering space and social opportunity where this space could be rented out. It could help host events, but oftentimes it's also just going to be open, informal space that a big goal here was to provide an opportunity for engagement and kind of discovery where the court tennis game is on display and provide an exhibition for folks to be able to look out through windows that you can see along the bottom and the side here. So this will have plenty of ample viewing from the upper level down into the court tennis court itself. And then there's an extended viewing space on the back at the bottom there along the serving end, where you can also look out and have ample glass to look out and see the game. And then up on the north side of the plan, we've also got space for a bar that Alex has aptly named the Tam Bar. It's going to be angled to match the same angle of the tambour in the court and really kind of provide a cool connection there and also help serve as a social hub for that upper level space as well. And then finally, you'll see some support space for catering and staging behind that would allow an event to be hosted and staffed and served on that upper level as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex and let her kind of walk through some of the interior views and give you a better sense for what this space feels like. And I guess before you pick that up, we've got a couple of cross sections that show the space. And the important thing to note here is that we're showing a clear height of 32 feet in the middle. The lighting, the planned design approach on the lighting is to provide indirect lighting from the sides of the court so that there's no direct glare or downlighting or danger of balls hitting lights in play. And then we're looking at providing a acoustical wood finish ceiling that follows the slope of the structure. So that's that dark line that you're seeing defining the rest of the court, which should provide a really elevated, elegant experience on the court as well. And you'll see that show up in a few of the images that follow. And these are just some cross sections cut the opposite direction that show the connection to the upper and lower levels, cutting through the penthouse on the side. And then on the left-hand section, you'll see there's a portion that will have translucent daylight panels that will allow really diffuse daylight through that doesn't create any glare or direct sunlight, but provides nice, even daylighting in the daytime. And then that is mirrored across onto the lounge side. That'll help provide some indirect and shared light to that space as well. Alex, why don't you kind of lead us into the dimension aspects, and then you can walk us through the 3D views.
Sure. This is actually, I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but a documentation of many of the courts and their very specific measurements. And as you know, and Haven was talking about earlier, no court is ever quite the same. So we've been fortunate to work with Haven, and many of you in your experience, you've shared what would make the optimal court for both the community and the anticipated members. So this is what we've been working on so far, and actually Haven's kind of fine-tuned some of these, and we're hoping to incorporate those as we get more information. Do you want to go into more detail? Or?
No, that's the part that I made reference to earlier, where we're working with particularly with Chris Ronaldson and Colin Lumley, who have done as much thinking about this as really anybody in the world. There have been a few others as well who have been helpful. Howard Angus has been helpful with lighting. Bruce Paxton has been helpful with floors. Peter Luckilly has built 2 courts himself, or caused them to be built. And so he has been very helpful as well. And there have been a number of people who've been contributing to the overall effort. Things like there was apparently a reference in a book that was written probably 300 or 400 years ago that says the length of the court depends on the speed of the ball, while the width of the court depends upon the speed of the player. And so trying to think about what the game looks like today, what the equipment looks like today, what people's fitness is today, and everything from what we wear on our feet to how fit we are to hydration and all sorts of things that make us able to play the game. What's that going to look like 50 years from now when this court is still in use? Michael was observing that wasn't it a good thing that we play with wooden rackets? And, will that continue to be the case? I personally hope so, but I don't know. So we have to think through all of those dimensions, realizing that every one of them rewards something and probably punishes something else. So if you make a shot, an easy offensive shot, you're punishing the defender who's trying to do something about it. So we're trying to get those balances right, and it remains a work in progress.
So here we can start with the actual court area. And so this is where all of the experience and lessons learned that you've shared kind of comes together. Even just this morning, we heard from Bruce Paxton, who shared the secret for Big League 2.0, and that's quite exciting. So in addition to the gallery area, you'll see that the enclosed second level viewing area that Braden was talking about will begin right after the second chase line, and it'll use butt glazed mullions to ensure a consistent playing surface. Additionally, we've incorporated a wood paneled ceiling, partially inspired by Hampton Court, to allow for improved acoustics and better light reflection. We're currently working with a lighting specialist who's created a digital model of the space for reflectance values and to help us understand the best way to use LEDs and harness the diffuse clerestory light on the right of your page, all above the play line, to indirectly light the space without creating glare and ensuring sufficient lux and uniformity, especially in the corners. This area behind the dead-ons is separated by a glass partition wall so the members can watch and socialize without distracting the people on the court. We're also examining ways to incorporate slides on the upper panel so these can be opened during tournament play for additional dead-on seating. Behind here by the fireplace, you'll see plenty of display area lining the lounge. This could include documentation of the club's history, match memorabilia, or information about the history of the players for home court visitors. Up here on the second viewing area, this is kind of a special experience. Besides providing additional space for observers, you'll see that this butt glazed window follows the play line, and the extension of the wood paneled court ceiling into this area helps make viewers feel like they're part of the game, and it'll be a great introduction for new future players. This is the mezzanine we were discussing earlier. Along its adjacent mezzanine, you'll have a comfortable viewing area to overlook both the court tennis and the lawn tennis games. Actually, Haven was telling us a couple days ago that this might be one of the only places he's seen where someone can see both courts and both these sports simultaneously. We hope this area will be a great place for players and viewers to gather, but also a wonderful opportunity to display the history of the game, both past and present, along these walls here, and perhaps inspire some lawn tennis players. I guess 2 weeks ago, we went and visited the Tuxedo Park in New York Racket Club. And we were really inspired by the way the court tennis community supports members from around the world. And as we were discussing, Haven actually suggested a wonderful idea of incorporating banners to kind of harness the height of this room, kind of massive height in this room, and celebrate the crest of all these international clubs. These adjacent clerestory windows not only help to light this area, but will make these glow and feel like a really special experience. Finally, along this angled wall is our tam bar that Braden was describing earlier. This will be a great place for people to gather. It'll be an honor bar. It could also be repurposed for and staffed during events or used as a buffet, depending on the need. So it'll be a nice flexible space. It'll bring people in on both sides. Yeah. Any questions?
Go back to an image. Maybe an image. An image for a backdrop. There you go. That's good.
Anything else?
No, I think that's great. We could, Ryan, we could probably open it up to people's questions, conversations, discussion. Temple has his hand up.
I do. What a wonderful job. My goodness, you all have really learned a lot. I wondered if you, the architects, the three of you, had ever heard of this game before. That's one question. How'd you?
We have not.
You have not. Okay.
I can answer and as well and tack onto that. The general manager at Westwood Country Club called me back in the spring after Haven and John Motes had started broaching the idea of building this project in partnership with them. And he called me up and the first question he asked was, have you ever heard of court tennis? And, you know, I had to admit that I hadn't, but as soon as we got off the phone, I went on YouTube and spent far too many minutes watching highlights of the World Championship and, you know, tours of courts around the world and intros to the game, and went back and shared those with Michael and Alex and as well. And we spent far too much time going down the rabbit hole of learning how much there is that we don't know about this game. It's fascinating. And as an architect, it's also fascinating because it's so much of the game relies on the geometry and the structure of the court itself. And the fact that there is no standard and every court is unique and different is so fascinating to us. And it's also a great opportunity to try and do something special and right that will help make for a great playing experience here.
You know, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it because we do so many projects for subject matter that we think we know a lot about. And what really happens is we fail to do the research because we can't admit we don't know everything about it. But with court tennis, we got very enthusiastic and jumped in and did enormous research, more research than we've done on any project I can think of. And we've done hundreds, if not 1,000. And it felt like a journalist or a litigator that is good at what they do, but they have to really research the subject matter to either write a scholarly article or the great American novel, as it may be. And each of the three of us went about doing our research our own way, where Braden, you know, watched the World Championships. I researched, was interested in the entire history and materials. Alex actually stalked and found Claire Fahey and communicated with her by text and email to learn more about the sport. And together, we feel like, along with Haven's tours of New York and Tuxedo, as well as so many of you that have contributed so much knowledge from these various Bibles and collection of data from every court that's been built. We certainly have learned a lot about it and have enjoyed it thoroughly.
When you walked into New York and Tuxedo and even Princess Court, you had to just, it bowls you over.
It does.
Yeah.
That's an accurate statement.
It's to the research question, Temple. There was a day back in the spring when we first met, Braden and Michael and Alex, and they had some things to show us. And one of the things that really stood out was how far up the learning curve they had gone before they even said hello to any of us. And the idea of, I think one of the questions that came up was that one of them had been thinking about how did you light a court tennis court before there was electricity? And obviously much of the history of court tennis, there was no electricity. And so they found the clear story windows that they're doing in Calwall now. And I thought, wow, what a good group to work with. These are people who truly are, as interested as we are. And it's continued over the months since then in exactly the same way. So it's been terrific. Other questions?
Let's see. I think Paul Tennant had a question, has his hand up.
Yeah, it was a wonderful presentation, and it's such an exciting project, and it's lovely to see some familiar faces in the thumbnails who I haven't seen for a long time. So, hello everybody. I just wanted to ask about changing rooms, and one of the joys of this sport is that there are some amazing changing facilities around the world that almost are part of the experience. And we brushed over the pool house quite quickly. I wondered if you could tell us whether the pool house will be big enough, actually, I think is my main question for everybody who's playing lawn tennis and court tennis, and whether there are any sort of kind of social aspects of the changing rooms as there are in places like Tuxedo and New York and so on.
Well, I can tell you that Westwood Country Club is a very fine country club in the DC area. But as in most country clubs, the golf locker rooms are a lot nicer than the tennis locker rooms. So members and players can certainly use those, but the ones that are at the tennis facility are, they're perfectly nice, but they are not even a fraction of what we saw at the New York Tennis and Racket Club. So I'm just going to tell you that up front. If you come here and are expecting the New York Tennis and Racket Club and their McKean Mead and White building, you might be a tad disappointed. But maybe that's something that we can work on together with the club after we get this built. But right now, we have a schedule and a budget that doesn't include upgrading their tennis locker rooms.
Yeah, Paul, some of those changing rooms at those courts in England are just awful. So most anything would be better than most of the changing rooms in England. So.
But I like how you think, and I'd like to do that.
Uh-huh.
I promise you I wasn't trying to be internationally competitive. I've spent enough time in the United States that I just love the way you do things here. So maybe I've just started to luxuriate in the American way.
Right, you'll have to walk across to the golf locker room.
I think Jonathan had a question. Jonathan, are you?
Yeah, I thank you. Great presentation. I want to give a shout out particularly to the change room in Boston. Too. My question is about the glass for the galleries for the dead on upper levels. Is it all the same glass? And is it the case, I'm not sure if I missed, all the galleries on the court, none of them have rope, it's all glass? And I'm just curious because I've only played on the DC court once, but is it the same glass as was used for the whole side of that court, and I'm just kind of curious about for the galleries, what kind of materials are being used.
All right. We probably misled you a little bit in thinking that the area that the galleries will be the usual netting that you're used to. The dead-on itself will have the usual netting that you're used to. It is just the glass that is on the playing surfaces is above the penthouse, behind the server, and above the penthouse to the left of above his left shoulder. The question that you ask, everything else below the penthouse is going to be netting exactly as you're used to in every other court that you've played. You raise an interesting point about the glass at Prince's Court. To do that over again, I wouldn't. We went into that with a geography that said if there was to be any viewing at all, it had to be from behind the main wall. And since you can't see through concrete unless you're Superman, it had to be glass. But we didn't have the slightest idea how to do it. We didn't know that hadn't the slightest understanding of what was really going to be the problem. We thought that the ball was going to be the problem, but we had obviously failed our 7th grade physics because the ball has very little mass, even though it's going very fast. The real problem was what happens when a person who might have let his fitness slip a little bit goes crashing into the wall. And that was the reason that it had to be, frankly, quite heavily over-engineered, and to a certain degree lost the value of being able to see up and down the court because the posts were too close together. The easy solution to that, which you only learn after you've made the mistake, is you bring the glass up to a level that a person can't run into it with his shoulder. And so you can see that the glass is now far higher than anybody can run into it. And therefore you have a completely different set of parameters as to how thick the glass has to be. And you also get to have much larger panels because it doesn't need as much support structure because the ball isn't as heavy as any of us. So that's pretty much the story on glass. There was no reason to choose a glass main wall here because that's not the way the geography looks. We have a lot more space behind the court because this is a deeper building than what we have at Prince's Court. And so we can be a lot more traditional. And if someone ever came and said, would you build a glass main wall again? If the geography of the venue required it, maybe, but I think I would probably begin it, I would have it normal material for the main wall up to at least a bando, and then begin the glass above that.
I have a question on the lawn tennis courts. Are they going to be with a bubble on in the winter, or the bubble comes off, or are they going to have some kind of a permanent structure?
No, this will all be under one permanent structure that will have 3 lawn tennis courts and 1 real tennis court.
Oh, okay. So are they, and does that have a ceiling that comes off, or they're indoor tennis courts year round?
They're indoor tennis courts.
Oh, okay.
Year round indoor.
Okay. How about putting a sauna or a hot room in the locker room?
That's a good idea. We should look into that. I don't know if it's in the scope right now, but it certainly could be.
I have one kind of tricky question. Is the court surface going to be fast or slow?
It's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
No, it'll be different.
I
mean, those of us who have played a lot, the New York courts are always very fast. The Philadelphia court was always very slow. Tuxedo is kind of in the middle. Boston was in the middle. And Newport's about in the middle. But in the old days, Lockie Dukar and Chris Ronaldson were kind of like a team together, except Chris would always send Lockie to New York to play in the US Open because Wayne was so difficult on that fast court there. And Chris would always come to Philadelphia to play, because then on the slow court, he had a little more of a chance to win. Anyway, I just throw that out as a point of interest in case people don't realize that the surface is some are fast, some are slow. I don't know how you do it.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting, Sam. That is how much the degree to which that has been quantified, and there are actually mathematical measures that can be done today that probably could not be done certainly when Philadelphia or Tuxedo or New York were built 100 years ago or more. But there are now measures that you can have a surface to a particular specification. And we, on the floor, for example, we're working with Bruce Paxton, who has recently done they redid the floor at Morton Marl, and they came up with a solution that everybody seems to be very happy with. So happy, in fact, that they're calling it Bickley 2.0, and they're now selling T-shirts that say Bickley 2.0 on them. So if there is expertise in the world about how to do this, we've found it. And what, between Peter Luckilly, who's built 2 courts in the last 20 years, he did Burroughs and Wellington, and Bruce Paxton, who's just replaced a floor, we're probably as close to the best thinking there is in this country or in the world. And we have not yet determined, except to sort of be inside of an envelope. I mean, you could do an envelope from the biggest court to the smallest, from the fastest to the slowest, the most responsive to cut to the least, and so forth. And the goal is to be inside every envelope. You don't want to be at the extreme on anything. And I think particularly one doesn't want to be at the extreme on too fast, because we will have a fair number of beginner players, and it is important for them to feel that it's fun as well. And if the court's too fast, they don't hit the ball over the net as much.
One last question. Are you going to have a markers box
Yes,
up at the net
yes.
or in the dead-ons?
Well, both. First of all, you have to have a markers box so that you can get into the court.
Yes, you do.
And it's very interesting. Another conversation at another time about what the dimension of every gallery is. The area that is sort of the filler or the gap area is in fact the markers box. So you could have a markers box that's very narrow, that has adverse consequences if you have to ever change the light bulbs and you need a cherry picker to go in there.
Right.
There's a very intricate set of designs that involves being able to take the net post away, out when you roll a cherry picker into the court and then you replace the lights. But there is also a distance between the end of the wall at the hazard end near the net that creates the opening between the net and the hazard end, and the end of the wall at the serving end. And that can actually be wider or narrower. And as you lengthen a court, you bring the extra length into that dimension. So if we are successful in making the court at the sort of longer end of the envelope, then the distance will be found between those 2 openings where you change ends. But
Right.
it will be a markers box in both places, and whichever one people choose to use is what they're going to do at the time.
Okay, great.
It may be a dumb question, but as I look at the net, when it gets beneath the penthouse, I don't see a connecting pole from the top of the net to the penthouse.
I suspect it is a certainty that we will make a mistake, but we won't make that one.
We'll be
Okay, all right.
Well said.
In addition, Colin Lumley spent a good deal of time the other day after our conversation sending me a picture of the what I would call a turnbuckle. That is the way that you can precisely tighten the net so that it is exactly 5 feet under the bando and exactly 5 feet on the main wall without having a crank that could hit you in the thigh when you were changing ends. Or as we do at Princess Court, we actually have a little triangular door stopper that brings that just brings the rope up just a little bit tighter to get to the correct height. So I think we're probably going to do that one better than at least that we have done before. But we've taken some advice on it, and yeah, there's got to be a pole there.
Rapid fire. What will be the max viewing capacity?
Well,
Probably 20, 40,
the dead-ends
70.
and mezzanine will be the same as everybody else's 7 foot deep space. We probably have room for nominally 40 to 45 more in the royal dead-ends and 200 or more in the upper tambar.
Where I would have gotten to. And plus side galleries, plus people will sit in the side galleries as well. I think
if you hosted a world championship, you could get 300 people at a party easily.
Yeah, and you could get 300 people watching it live. And then if you think about those two levels of the mezzanine, you could easily have 2 big screen TVs that would enable, probably another 250 people in each level. So I think you'd be over 1,000.
Wow.
And I think you'd be over 1,000. And one of the things that remains to be discussed, and we have, I think, the world's leading expert on the topic, is where do the cameras go? And Ryan Carey has basically has created all the expertise that exists, or very nearly all the expertise that exists, on how you stream real tennis matches. And so he's going to have a lot of input into where the cameras are located and what kind of systems we have.
Does anyone know the largest crowd they've ever had at a world championship? Does anyone know that figure? It can't be as big as this, can it?
Probably not. The upper levels in New York would give you a lot of space. The upper levels in Queens would give you a lot of space. But I'm not sure that they would get to quite that level. I mean,
in Melbourne, is there an entire upper level like Tuxedo? I think there might be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's the goal is to be comparable to those.
Wow.
How does the ceiling height compare to the R&T in New York, and will it accommodate my lob into the data to beat Chase 1? I think the answer is definitively yes on the latter part.
The New York is one of the, I would say, with the exception of Jesmond Dean, New York may have the highest ceilings in the world. So this will not be as high as that. This is aimed at, well, you can see the play line at the back of the court that you can see in the picture is 24 feet high to the bottom of the board. So you have the board, which is like 8 inches, and then it looks like it's maybe another foot or 2 above that. Then the building, the peak of the roof is parallel to the net, although it probably won't be right over the net, because we will try to, if you imagine the court as a box, and you're going to push the box as far towards until the out of court line hits the ceiling, you're going to be pushing it to one end so that we have more room at the other end for spectators and social space. So that the peak of the roof is actually probably going to be over somewhere, maybe the pole of Chase the First or maybe Chase the Door, something like that. And that gets up much higher. Again, it was a consultation with Chris Ronaldson, who said, you know, once you get to 30 or 32 feet, you have plenty.
I would think if Temple can lob in the current Prince's Court, then Adam should have no problem lobbing into this data.
So
I did tell Temple that, you know, I think it's no secret that Temple has been a huge supporter of this effort, and he deserved the recognition as appropriate recognition. And I proposed to him that we have a banner that would hang from the ceiling right over the net, right exactly parallel to the net, and it would hang down about 10 feet. And he thought about that for a moment. He said, what would that do to my lob?
That Prince Edward said was unattractive, but somewhat effective.
What's that, Vern?
Ken Forden wants to know how the dimensions were chosen.
I would say they have not been finally chosen, but it is a subject that is very interesting because every dimension either favors something, well, every dimension favors something, but at the same time, it disfavors something else. If you're on one end of a main wall force and you have a giant dead-on, then it's going to reward more main wall forces. And if you don't like volleying, that's not going to be a happy place for you. So everything is essentially a zero-sum game, and you have to think through what is it that you want to reward. Chris Ronaldson made an extremely interesting point. He said, you know, Haven, you could design a court in which it was more advantageous to be at the receiving end than at the serving end. But for 1,000 years, everybody has thought the opposite, that you wanted to be at the serving end, not the receiving end. So one of his admonitions is, please don't build a court that changes that advantage. And I said, well, words to live by. That's an easy one. So one of the things that he actually had a very interesting view, and I had to correct myself because I would have thought it was different, was what is the angle of the penthouse? The steeper the angle of the penthouse, the more advantageous it is for the server. So my feeling was, well, we're going to have some new players at Westwood, and maybe we should make it a little bit easier to return serve. Chris corrected me by saying, yes, except remember that people play at their own level. So the receiver, who is not yet very experienced, is likely playing a server who isn't very experienced either. So we went back to the idea of the steeper penthouse because it does keep the advantage at the serving end. The degree that one looks for a steeper penthouse is 27 degrees. You know, that's one of the things. Here's a mistake that we knew we had made at the first Prince's Court, but didn't actually know why we had made it. And that is our tambour kicks too many shots out into the hazard. And so you hit a lovely shot that you think ought to be a winner, and it pops out into the hazard. And not only is it not a winner, but you've lost the serve. And so we certainly didn't want to do that. And we've always blamed that on the angle of the penthouse, of the tambour at Prince's Court. We were wrong. The problem with the tambour at Prince's Court is that it's too close to the hazard line by a couple of feet. And if you simply move that back, as is the case in many other courts, you will be kicking the ball back where you expect it. The envelope would be to try to make every ball off the tambour either go into a triangle that would be bounded by the bottom of the winning gallery at the back end, or the line between the receiver and his partner. So you would like as many balls off the tom board to go into that triangle as possible. And that also has an angle. I can't remember what it is, but those are the kinds of things we're thinking about. Other things, if you would like people to hit the ball on the floor, one of the ways to make them do it is to make the galleries a little smaller. And how do you do that? Well, you can raise the height of the ledge by an inch or two, or you can make the bando 2 inches wide, 3 inches wide, or 4 inches wide. Either of those would tend to reduce the size of the galleries by a small amount, but perhaps enough to make it worthwhile for people to hit the ball on the floor as well. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about.
Rapid fire round, netting or solid grill?
TBD.
Okay. If solid, which king or monk will get selected?
In my world, in 2020, we have but one king. Actually, it raises a very interesting point. This is an extraordinarily generous group, and that has created a bit of a traffic jam at the top of the naming opportunities. And I think we should, even if we take a moment to remember Freddie Prinze, who's no longer with us, let's think that if it hadn't been for Freddie, there wouldn't have been Prince's Court. And if it hadn't been for Prince's Court, we wouldn't be doing this. And so we do not plan to lose sight of Freddie Prinze in this new court. Interestingly, Prince's Court has always been called Prince's Court, and the court itself the court itself, not the entire complex, but the court itself will remain as Prince's Court, and the crest that was developed in 23 years ago will stay. So I guess if it's a solid grill, it will have that with the Westwood W 1954 underneath it. If it's a netted grill, then it won't.
What color is the floor and the rest of the court?
It's very interesting. I mean, courts can be very, very interesting different colors. Wellington is a periwinkle blue, which you might have to Google to figure out what periwinkle blue is. It's too blue for my taste. What has been quite fascinating is actually listening to Michael, who has now looked at a lot of pictures of a lot of courts. And I would say, if I may speak for you, that it's virtually axiomatic for you that the walls need to be a variation of charcoal gray and the floor needs to be a variation of red.
I agree and I support that. I like the traditional colors, but also the specifications we got from a monolithic poured floor, ground to a perfect 400 grit. That is the right level of a fast court, but not too fast on the floor. And we'll try to match the walls as close as possible. But if we grind a natural aggregate of the concrete and use some of the local colors, which is that Virginia red clay, or even an aggregate that has a richer red, we have a range of reds that will be natural and stay present for the life of the court. So I think you want darker colors so you have good contrast on the ball. And from what we've learned, that people have experimented, but over time, they tend to come back to the charcoal gray, a variation of a red floor, a light ceiling.
I must say.
Light.
So,
Yeah. There's You learn a lot. You learn a lot about how the floors are done and how the walls are done. What's your next question, Vern?
We have a question about energy efficiency for the architects, whether there's any low emissions or sustainability kind of features.
Yes, there are. We'll be using high efficiency mechanical systems, and it's a steel building. So by definition of steel in this country, most of it's recycled and recyclable. The natural daylighting will help. We're not chasing specific points under our contract for either LEED or well or earthcraft, but it's a topic that's very important to this office. So all of our buildings are designed with sustainability, the environment, efficiency in mind, and this certainly will be.
Temple here. Well, what about air conditioning? Is this going to be air conditioned?
Yes.
Ooh. Summer play, year round.
What wood will be used for the penthouse? And will it be finished in natural wood or something else?
We're still working on that, but right now we're thinking that we want a thick base for the wood to either be a structural engineered or structural insulated panel or a filled strut with a filled cavity so it doesn't sound like a drum, with either a cement board or 2 layers of heavy ply, and then either a dark stained maple that can be a dark stained and very smooth, so that it has a very similar tonal color as the walls. Not a lot of contrast, but a little bit of contrast to differentiate the wood and the walls. But this is still in process in terms of the final color palette, because that we want to be very careful with that.
How about the smoothness or roughness of the finish on the penthouse? Is that still also TBD?
In general practice, we'd like to get the texture of all the surfaces as close as possible, understanding that ground concrete is going to be on the floor is different than a rubbed finish on the walls and the wood on the penthouse. But as the actual texture goes, we're starting with about a 400 grit on the floor, which has been deemed a pretty optimal between fast and slow. This is a good balance. And we'll try to match whatever we get to one of the surfaces as close as is practical.
Ted Ganeos asked about heating and humidity concerns and also about lighting. I guess starting with the first, how are you addressing the common sweating problem that happens in some courts?
Well, a lot of sweating happens because you've got uninsulated solid concrete walls that have a different heat load on the inside and outside. That's what causes condensation in the building, just like it causes on your glass when you have ice lemonade out on the outside in the summer. This building is a building within a building because it's a metal building on the outside. And in order to space it from the structural steel, we're actually going to build a concrete or CMU, a block wall on the inside. So we're actually going to have a double wall system that will be insulated so that we do not anticipate any condensation or sweating issues at all.
Great. He also asked if we'll be able to play at night with LED lights, which I guess is a concern.
Yes, we will definitely have LED lights. They're very energy efficient for our sustainability model, and they give us a brightness and control that will allow us to get a uniform and even light on the surface. And we're looking at several options to achieve that. And we want to strive for a lux level in the 750 to 800 range with a variation inside of about 0.8 or 0.85. So we want to have a very even and bright light, but not so bright that it's distracting to the player and that you lose the ball in the lights.
And is that still contemplated to be bounced off the roof, or is that in being considered still?
We're working with our lighting consultant to model it in the computer both ways so that we can find which is the optimum. I think the indirect light, which has not always been successful in the past, was challenged, but LED lighting has gotten so much more sophisticated in the last few years. I mean, literally the last few years. I think there's a Nobel Prize for it, that we're optimistic about that, but we're carrying several options for both cost and optimal performance.
Chris Huey asks whether there will be an after-action report when construction is completed so that others can use them as guidelines to build subsequent new courts.
Yes. I have to-do lists that go out for decades. And as soon as this is done and we're actually playing on it and not doing something about it every day, yeah, regathering the information that was provided to us and passing it along to the next people, very much on my to-do list. And, I think that there's a lot about the design, and frankly, there's a lot of other stuff that goes on that is valuable for anybody who would want to build a court. Not the least of it is we were worried in March when we all got together and said, okay, we've got 6 months or 9 months to get this thing done. What's going to happen to, fundraising? And will anybody allow fundraising over Zoom? And the answer is emphatically that they do. And frankly, it's probably a lot more efficient. And so, I plan to write everything that I can gather together about my experience and this, and share it with Charlie and John Motes and Mary and Vern and others who will have been part of it, to say, oh, you forgot this or that. But yeah, the idea is to play it forward and have it available for the next guy. Peter Luckilly has set quite an example on that, in terms of his now having built 2 courts and having thought this through. He has created what he calls the Bible that tells you everything that you should want to know. And we have it. It's in Alex's notebook, and it's been very helpful. So yes, you absolutely want to do that, and you want to gather it all together. And by the way, we should all be very supportive of the TNRA's effort to be the repository for that information. And let's be sure it's online. Let's be sure it's everywhere, because nobody means to have it be proprietary.
Temple here.
Sorry, go ahead, Temple.
Have there been any other cities or any other places in the United States that have expressed interest? Have you all heard from, is word getting out that this is remarkable what's happening? And is there any other place interested at this point?
Well, I had a very, very nice conversation with Bill Bickford the other day. Bill, I don't know if you're on this call, maybe you are. I can't see all the little boxes, but I had a terrific conversation with Bill, who was most helpful. And recall that he did the renovation in Chicago and has been extremely helpful. But otherwise, really, the visit to New York, it was a pretty quiet day there, but there were some people who were interested. And I thought that the pros in Tuxedo were extremely interested in what we were doing. we asked, what's the most important part of the court? And both of them immediately tapped their racket on the floor.
If you want unsubstantiated rumors of new court locations, I'm always happy to, jabber about that. But I think after this in Charleston, there may be a gap while everybody sort of recovers, because it's been a long quest for both courts. I from time to time hear rumblings about Denver, about Greenwich. I think people chat about Florida from time to time, but maybe in all of our lifetimes, but not in the next 2 or 3 years, I suspect. Jonathan Morrow says real estate is cheap in Chattanooga, and Danny McBride is suggesting Des Moines. So those are also excellent options.
Okay.
What's going to be the hardest part to get right?
Ooh. I haven't been asked that question.
The walls. I think we have the technology and the skill sets to get the floor to the specs. We understand how to get the sections of the mezzanine and the roofs. We can get the details right. The walls are very large and seamless, and to get those true and precise can and will be done, but it's going to take concerted attention. And I know several clubs that have done the walls have done them and redone them and done them again. So we don't want to do this 3 or 4 times. We're putting the work into it to get it done right.
That's a good point.
Charlie Katz asks, how hard will it be to get the contractor to meet these tight specifications?
We think we have a good contractor, but humans are human, and we're going to have to write a very clear, tight spec and stay on it.
My guess is that, again, something that wasn't done well the first time was we didn't build anything like the relationship with the contractor at Prince's Court that we did with the architects of Prince's Court. Obviously, I mean, we're miles ahead on the relationship with MTFA. But I think that another piece of it that's going to be important is to build a relationship with the person at the contractor,
yes,
who is going to be in charge of it, because he needs to, that individual really needs to understand that this is a playing surface, and that this is all part of the game, and they've got to come to an understanding that the ball goes really hard and stuff breaks, or stuff can break. So I'm guessing it's interesting. Michael describes it in terms of specifications, which is his world. I wouldn't know how to do that. But taking the person who's going to be in charge of the actual project and taking him and showing them the game and showing him why each thing is important and how carefully we've thought about it, I hope will inspire him to do the same thing.
No, I think that's a great point. And this contractor is big enough to do a perfectly good job, but is not a giant corporate contractor. And they've been around for 2 generations. And I know the father and the son, who are both involved in the business, and they've been trying to get into the country club world for 10 years. And this is their second one. And we played a role in helping them get both jobs, because I thought they would do a good job, and they have. But I don't mind reminding them that they don't want this to be the last one they ever do. And if something does not go perfectly, there is that risk.
I think we've reached the end of the chat. If other people have questions, fire away, or Haven, you can start thinking about taking us out whenever you like.
Should we go to we can just glance at who's, if people are raising their hands or whatever.
Yeah.
Stop sharing. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Does it sound as if, Catherine, are you raising your hand to ask a question? No, you're waving your hand to say goodbye. It's dinner time.
Actually, I do have a question, and this might not be a question for the architects, but, and it might be for your committee in Temple. And what is the arrangement with the country club in terms of membership? And is the club its own club? And if we come for a tournament, can we play golf or tennis and that kind of thing?
Charlie Katz, our general counsel, Charlie Katz, has been dealing with that. And John Motes has also been dealing with the relationship with Westwood. Do you want to take that one, Charlie? Unless
Sure,
on the line as
be
well.
happy to, and John, jump in if you'd like as well. We are all going to become members of Westwood, so it's not a club within a club. They're going to open up the membership to anyone who's a friend of court tennis. With various level memberships. So we'll have opportunities for people who want to be full golf members, people who want to be just tennis members, and then people who just want to be court tennis members. So there's going to be opportunities for everyone to join with different pricing associated with that. For visitors, certainly we're going to allow to have tournaments, and we're going to provide for people to have tournaments. John, you might want to talk a little bit about some of the visitors, how we get people in to play golf and tennis and other things. I think that's still, you may have a better idea of that.
Well, visitors are going to be fairly easy to do because we can bring any members in, and even if they're not present, have guests come in and play. It will not be a problem. It's a very relaxed guest policy that is within Westwood, and we'll actually be able to have people from out of town play very easily. So Westwood has that to our benefit.
Right.
Catherine, there's another aspect of that that's kind of interesting. Because we are doing this through the United States Court Tennis Preservation Foundation, as you know, all of your donations, and thank you everyone for having made a donation and give some thought to making another. Those are deductible. And one of the trade-offs for deductibility is that the court is open to the public. Now, one of the things that creates more public than anything else is a tournament. And so being able to appear to play in the tournament, to then bootstrap off of some of the other things that one might do there, is an important aspect for the tax deductible feature. And I think that Westwood is going to be very interested in the idea that suddenly their players, or what will soon be our players, will be able to go everywhere else and be welcomed, and they will quickly understand that works both ways. So yeah, we're looking forward to having a lot of people. One of the things that we talk about on overseas calls is how close we are to Dulles Airport.
Yeah, Bender can get here easily. Bender, we love Bender. Yeah.
All right. No, thank you. That was a good.
Other questions?
Vern, do you see Hufford's question? I can ask it.
Go ahead.
Is the MTFA contract with Westwood for the whole facility or just for the court tennis portion? How about the contract for the construction contractor and time, materials, fixed price, or other type of contract? Technical.
That's a great question. Our contract as the architects help them with a larger master plan that has everything from golf simulation to fitness to wine rooms and other hospitality areas. And we're now the architect for the whole tennis facility and integrated it. And within that, there's the court tennis. So we're the architect for all of the above. And the general contractor is the firm that we recommended for this, and one previous is the contractor for all of that work. And we are finding some economies of scale in our work as well as they are in their work, to be doing all of it to coordinate the work together. And we're both under a fixed fee contract for the collective scope of work and a very rigorous schedule.
Thanks. That's a very clear answer. Thanks much.
Thanks, Steve. Other questions? Hey,
Just one last one, maybe.
yeah, sure, Ted.
Have you thought about adding for the future any consideration for a rackets court down the line, maybe?
That's that. I guess my first thought there, Ted, is here's the mistake I would like to make. If you can imagine wanting to make a mistake, the mistake that I would like to make is that somebody fairly soon says, "How come you didn't build two of them?" And so I would see probably a second court tennis court if this thing really takes off, and there's an interesting aspect that we might discuss about that, and that would probably be prior to a rackets court.
Okay, but there is enough land, right?
It's a little tight.
Anything's possible, but anything's possible, but it would have certain challenges.
Does Westwood have squash?
No.
No. Okay. All right.
To amplify that answer just slightly, there's 750 families are members of Westwood. Picture a family as a couple plus 2 children, say, on average. That gives you an addressable universe of 3,000 people. The 3,000 people, we're going to bring over about probably 75, maybe 80 players, something like that. If capacity of a court is something like 125 to 150, then we would be looking for about that number more. The 3,000 people that are at Westwood begin with the following qualifications. Number one, they're used to going there. You don't have to say, come to this new place that you've never been to and what's the traffic like? So that's a big plus. Number two, they're economically qualified. Nobody thinks that court tennis is a cheap game, and they're used to paying country club dues and so forth. And so they get another check mark next to that. But the third, and I think most important one, is that they're athletically qualified. Look around on this screen and praise yourselves. If you can play court tennis, you're a pretty good athlete. And there are a lot of projects that have gone badly because people overestimated the available skill level. We begin with a huge advantage in having 3,000 people, a good number of whom are going to possess the skills necessary to enjoy this game. So that is a whopping advantage of where we are. Plus, the demographics, the zip code, all of that sort of stuff all fits into the same thing. And, you know, I can tell you that Vienna, Virginia and McLean, Virginia are just as aggressive about getting their children into college through sports as any place else is.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 very prosperous zip codes.
Thank you.
Okay, I hope I'm not interrupting somebody to say let's wrap it up. But thank you very much. Thank you to our friends, and let's give them a hand because they've done a heck of a job. And thank you all for being a part of this conversation. There will be others as we progress. So come again, and we are making fabulous progress towards the financial goal that we have set for ourselves. And if any of you would like to be one of the ones who might put us over the fence, we welcome that. So thank you.
Right.
Thank you, everyone, for your great support, both tonight and financially. And as Haven said, give again.
It's really fun.
Yeah, no, I would just add, if anybody has any questions later on that they think of, they can email us at washingtoncourttennis@gmail.com.